All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Welcome, everyone, to FOIA Friday, a community podcast about all things public records. We have some great guests on board today, and I'll let them introduce themselves first. Danielle and Kate, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, my name's Kate, Kate Huangpu. I'm a government reporter at Spotlight PA.
And I am Danielle Ohl. I am Kate's colleague at Spotlight PA, and I am an investigative reporter covering the justice system.
And Madison?
Yeah, I'm Madison Holcomb. I'm a reporter based in Shasta County, California at Shasta Scout.
Cool. And the topic of today's conversation is going to be public records and ICE, which we're going to try to get at in a few different ways. These different reporters have used different records and different data in their reporting, so we hope to give you a little bit of a menu of items. Before I get started, speaking of that menu of items, we just published a guide this week on 287G, which will probably come up multiple times in this conversation. So I'm just going to drop that in the chat for everyone. And yeah, the plan is to have a conversation, us four, for the next 30-ish minutes, 40-ish minutes, then open things up for questions. But as always, we do like to do this kind of mosh pit style as well. So if you have questions, you just want to jump in and throw them in the chat. We will also try to maybe answer those as we go, just depending on the flow of the conversation. Yeah, so to kick things off, I want to talk first with Danielle and Kate about your article about jails that earn money from contracts with ICE. Can you tell me a little bit about how that reporting started?
Kate, you want to go?
Yeah, yeah. So, Danielle and I went to IRE together, and we were talking about how we could better cover immigration in Pennsylvania because we don't have a specific immigration reporter in PA. I think we both respectively had been like making calls to sources and asking people in Pennsylvania, what stories do you see? I had a call with someone about these detention agreements, and that's originally what I thought we were RTKing for. They're usually like 48 to 72 hours. And then county just get paid to hold people for ICE, but it's for a very abbreviated point of time. And then when we made a list of counties that historically like had documented um, contracts with ICE to do something like this and filed RTKs to all those counties. But when we started getting paper like documents back, we saw that they were for longer than 48 to 72 hours. And so then started making calls and looking into, what is this kind of agreement? Um, that's sort of the genesis of the project.
So that original request was for the detention agreements, which are just for the short period of time. And I think also maybe already we bring Madison in a little bit because I know that's one of the things about the Reading office that you covered is that the idea should be that they're holding people there for this amount of time, but some experts say that may not always be the case, even with these kind of agreements. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. There's very specific facilities, and this is sort of different from like a jail where people are being held at. We have what's called a holding room in Reading, and this is basically a room that was only designed to hold people for a few hours at a time. Like if someone was detained somewhere in Northern California before they get sent to a larger detention facility, maybe down in SoCal, they're just supposed to stay here for a few hours, but per law, about a year ago, up until a year ago, they were supposed to only hold people for, I believe it was up to 12 hours. But then ICE, because of their ramping up of deportation activity, they were holding people in these cells for much longer than that, for days at a time, when they're not designed for that. I mean, they're just these really small concrete rooms. Most of them don't even have beds. There's fluorescent lights on all the time. So ICE changed their rules so that they could hold people there for longer and it would still be legal.
And the records that Kate, I guess you were looking for were for shorter term agreements.
Well, yeah, I mean, our first request was pretty broad because it was one of those things where we didn't exactly know what we were looking for. And Kate, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But like the conversation that Kate had was regarding detainers, which is like a specific thing. That's when ICE might not have necessarily like a long-standing agreement with a facility, but they'll send an email or some sort of, notification to the facility to say, hey, you have somebody that we know is has some sort of status, is not a citizen. Can you hold them so we can pick them up? So we initially asked for records, financial or otherwise, that would show any kind of cooperation between a jail and ICE. And what Kate was saying is like what we ended up getting back were these more long-standing agreements that we didn't realize allowed the jails to operate almost sort of like a mini detention center. So in Pennsylvania here we have Moshannon Valley Processing Center, which is the big detention center. It's out in a rural part of the western part of the state. But these jails that have these agreements that are sometimes through the U.S. Marshal Service, and sometimes just like direct contracts with ICE, they're almost like procurement contracts, and they kind of have that language. Like it's, they're buying like office supplies, but it's about, kind of like the detention of human beings. Um, so in those, we were able to see like the day rate that they're getting for a bed, like a person per bed per day, and other reimbursements that these jails are getting for like medical services and food services. I think we saw like kosher meals, right, Kate? Yeah.
Yeah, and just to take a step back to that first request, so the detainer agreements, are those one-off? Like every time ICE wants to contact a jail about someone who they have, is that a single agreement for a single person, or do they say we'll contact you anytime that this comes up, but we have an agreement that when we do contact you, you will hold that person until we pick them up? Is it like
We
one off
never
or
ended up
longer?
getting the actual detainer agreement. That's still like 2 weeks. My understanding from talking with my source is that it's a contract agreement, and then they have like email communications or something of
Got
like
it.
I'm holding this or like we see you have this person where we want you to hold them for another 72 hours or something. Yeah, up to 72 hours. But yeah, when we filed, the request was really broad. It was like any invoices from the county to ICE for payments for services of holding, housing, um, yeah, immigrants like non-citizens. And then what we ended up getting were these monthly invoices from counties to ICE.
Got it. Did you have any pushback on those requests from any counties?
There were counties that maybe were like a little confused about what we were asking.
Hmm.
Um, we got a bunch of counties right up front that were like, we don't have anything at all. And then slowly the ones that had stuff started trickling in. Um, Counties were not consistent, I get in like the kind of information they were providing us. So some counties gave us lists of the number of people that they had, where their country of origin, how long they stayed, I think birth date, the names were blacked out. But other counties didn't have that. Some counties, I think, also sent along the actual contract with ICE and the county jail. Others didn't. So that was the main pushback from counties. Other than that, you know, when you call the RTK officer, they're like, right, like I see what you want, like we'll get it to you when we can. Some of the RTK officers, I think Danielle maybe had this conversation, was like, this is so much work. Like, it's not worth having this contract for all this work. Um, but,
Yeah.
Wait, it's so much work to fulfill the public records request that it's not worth having the contract
Well,
solely to do the public records request?
that is what somebody suggested. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem that like even that we're running into as we're talking about this is that for so long there was like so little attention on the ways that federal immigration enforcement has kind of started to kind of like creep in and overlap with state and local criminal justice enforcement to the point where it's like butter melted into toast. You know what I mean? Like it's so hard to figure out the different agreements and the different, so there's like the detainers that yes, like some counties have formalized agreements, but some will just honor one-offs. Like it's almost like a warrant, you know? They're like, hey, like we are coming for this person. Can you hold them? Right? And the jail could say yes or no, depending on whether they have a longstanding agreement, whether they don't. Then there's these detention agreements that Kate and I wrote about that are like service contracts for housing. Then you have a unique case like what Kate is talking about, this county, Clearfield in Pennsylvania, that basically acts as a pass-through between ICE and GEO, which is a private for-profit prison company that runs Moshannon Valley Processing Center. So to get around regulatory procurement laws from the Biden era, and I think maybe even like some origin of the Obama era, um, ICE contracts with this county. This county skims 20 to, or 200 grand, right, Kate? Off the top? Okay, per year. And then the county contracts with GEO. The county has no employees in the processing center. They have no oversight authority, really. They do nothing but act as the go-between for this administrative like loophole. And they are the ones that are like, we have gotten so many records requests and so many media requests and research requests and whatever about this agreement that we have that it's almost not worth it. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
In that, and the county is skimming that money off of the agreement based on what? Like, what are they providing for ICE and Geo?
nothing.
I
They're
think just
literally, yeah.
by virtue of being the pass through, they get like 1 million over 5 years. It's 200,000 a year, and
Mhm.
like that's it. That's all they do.
Yeah.
And just because they're like, this is in my county, I
Mhm.
guess our county commission has given this a stamp of approval. Now we get this X amount of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, the county commission didn't really have to prove anything to my knowledge. I
Hmm.
think they agreed to be the pass through, but they didn't like they have no oversight over the the detention center itself.
Interesting. This also brings up a point I was thinking about while reading your article is that right now I'm doing a lot of reporting in West Virginia, where opioid settlement money is often going to jail bills. And counties are constantly in debt and like tragically in debt over a long time to pay those jail bills. And I was reading your article and I was like, these jail bills, they shape everything. Can you talk about like when you actually started digging into it, what the county's justification were for these relationships, like the longer term relationships with ICE?
Yeah, I mean, I think uh a lot of the counties that we talked to, it was definitely a debate for some counties, like Erie, what was one of the ones in the story that we looked at where there were people, just residents who were on both sides of the issue saying like we want this money, like this is it's money, like we want that's good for us. But there were other people who said, this is immoral and we don't want to partner with ICE. Um, I know that for a lot of these counties, like Danielle said, like these agreements had gone back decades. And so they're like, why would we get rid of a perfectly good financial like source of income?
Hmm.
Um, now, just because now people are aware of it. But there were even Democratic county commissioners. I think Danielle had this conversation um, that said, I don't support what ICE is doing on a national level, but our county is so dependent on this money that it would not be responsible to just pull out all of a sudden. We would need to have some sort of long-term plan about how to supplement this income. Um, and so counties are getting hard hit from a lot of different angles. Our state budget's always late, and that means that they always have to take out loans and then they have to pay interest on the loans. There's less federal money coming through. And so all of those factors means that counties really need the income that they have, and this is one source of income.
And basically, ICE is saying we'll pay the per diem for these people. And so then you won't have to pay the state the per diem for those people.
Yeah, yeah, a per diem, and they also they pay for like virtual attorney visits, they pay for hospital travel, um, all things like that. And the counties that we talked to said like we don't have to make any updates or changes to our jail itself. So it's just, money they could be making without having
Yeah.
to put anything into it.
And Dylan, to your point with the reporting that you're doing, we did, and unless I'm like misremembering, I'm pretty sure we did run into some situations where, I mean, these are all extremely rural jails. Other than maybe Erie, which is like a bit of a larger metro area in Pennsylvania, but we're talking about like fifth, sixth, seventh largest, you know. These are in places that are remote, have like smaller tax bases, but have big jails that they built back in like the 90s or the early 2000s that are frankly bigger than what they need for the criminal population. So we did get a sense that in some places, these contracts are helping to pay down the cost of running a big jail that you don't maybe necessarily need for the amount of crime you have.
Hmm. When you were talking to experts, did you get like an understanding of how common this might be nationally? I'm just thinking for some of the folks listening in, like how common could this be in other states? Because for a lot of states with rural populations, they might have similar problems to Pennsylvania or West Virginia in terms of these jails that they can't actually afford.
Yeah, we talked to quite a few immigration lawyers and they were not surprised by that. Like this is not an uncommon practice. I think they were saying that it's even scaled up since the immigration crackdowns. And then coupled with in Pennsylvania, we have a few warehouses that ICE is trying to buy, or I think has bought, that are meant to be built out into these major detention centers. So I think um, from what we heard from like, I think we talked to a lawyer from the ACLU, we talked to a lawyer who was just based in Cam in central PA, this is not an uncommon practice, it seems. And so, there's even been documentation, there's like been documentation of these kinds of agreements with county jails. Uh, there was one in York County that closed during the pandemic, like they had an agreement, but they ended during the pandemic because of pandemic issues. So, definitely worth setting an RTK, in my opinion, especially the amount of detail you get is really interesting. Like the invoices can really give you a big picture of what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, and I think what I'm also hearing from you too is like maybe you also keep the request broad enough that it could encapsulate these sorts of different types of agreements.
Yeah, I would say ask for federal agreements. Um, because what we ended up having to do was file again because the first time we only asked for agreements with ICE, which doesn't some places were like good enough to, provide us the contract because they knew what we meant. But some places we had to file again because as I think Eric Bonds has kind of pointed out in the comments, a lot of these contracts are with the US Marshal Service and ICE is added as like a almost like an approved agency that can put federal prisoners in this jail. So, yeah, I would ask for contracts with federal agencies. Um, the contracts that we particularly received are called intergovernmental agreements or intergovernmental service agreements. And I would also encourage you guys to look on public FOIA libraries because some of these are already out there.
And just to repeat, so Eric's question was, or his comment and question was, we have it on good authority that our local jail is holding people on behalf of ICE through a U.S. Marshals agreement. When I FOIA'd for ICE detainers at the jail, the superintendent says that the jail only bills the Marshal Service and cannot give a breakdown between different federal agencies that may use the facility under the USMS IGA. I'd love advice on how to overcome this barrier. Um,
I'm also happy to send anyone who wants the RTK language that we
Yeah.
used. But yeah, we just sent in a different RTK once we knew
Yeah,
what kind of agreement it was.
maybe Hold on that. I'll look at, because I'm pretty sure that maybe one of the things that we got back, I remember the report specifically read out like immigration detainee or something like that. So you might ask the superintendent if there's different on their internal billing system or their internal inmate detainee like management system if they are tagging people under different categories. I would assume they have to be. Um, Not necessarily maybe for billing purposes, but definitely for like internal um operations because they have to hold these people to certain standards. Like there are federal detention standards that they have to meet for these federal prisoners that are different than maybe your state or local standards.
Hmm. I'm going to switch gears over to Madison. And Madison, you've been actually covering this um, so often that I'm just going to drop your whole author profile and also maybe some of the first stories. But can you talk a little bit about the very beginning? I think also reading some of your work, I felt like I was following your reporting step by step of like, oh, there is an ICE office. Oh, this is what it's doing. Oh, here's the next thing. Can you start with like, uh, how did you start digging into that building in Reading?
Yeah, so basically we like revealed that there's an ICE facility that isn't previously disclosed online anywhere and that any local officials didn't know about. So how that came about was when I started working at Shasta Scout last summer, I kind of just like randomly got this tip on Twitter with someone saying, "Hey, I used to work for the federal government. There's this ICE facility in Reading. I won't give you my name, but you should just look more into it." So it was just this really like ominous tip that I got, but I started researching what sort of documents that I'm supposed to request. And I was doing all of these like really long internet deep dives where I was doing sort of these like advanced searches to see if there were any public agreements between maybe like the city of Reading with ICE. And then I just started making these different requests. I was able to find in my like recent internet searches, the really quick ones, that there were like different lease agreements that were just like online on the City of Reading's website. So I started requesting more like specific documents, and then I think I also requested any like agreements that the City of Reading has with ICE and or DHS or HSI. So that's Homeland Security Investigations, which is also kind of part of ICE. And through all the different records requests, that's when I received basically confirmation that this facility does exist. I found the address of it, so I drove to the facility and I just kind of sat outside for a little bit. It's this like almost like this really big like shed structure that has these massive gates just like and fences surrounding it. It looks really crazy. Like if you're just kind of driving past on the street, a lot of people just wonder like, what is that? And we were actually able to even find because you can't have fences that are taller than 8 feet in the city of Reading. But we were able to find ICE's request to the city of Reading to actually like build these fences that were larger than 8 feet. And it was just this really interesting investigation where we eventually discovered that there's this ICE facility. As I mentioned previously, it's called a hold room, which is just kind of that like in between place that people are kept before being moved somewhere else. And we interviewed multiple city officials about this, like the police chief and the city manager, and they all said that they had no clue that this facility even existed. So it was just kind of operating under everyone's noses.
And so when you say it wasn't published anywhere else, what do you mean? Like what sort of data were you looking at to try to say, okay, like if it is here, it should be on this map or in this list?
Yeah, so ICE Online relatively just has all of their locations on like a map that you can see. And when I was looking at this map, I couldn't really see, like, there wasn't anything for Reading. I think the closest was maybe in Sacramento, which is about 2.5 hours south of here. So that was kind of the first red flag is that, you know, we have an ICE facility here, but it's not listed on ICE's site. I was able to find through some of my internet deep dives that there was an ICE presentation that was made a few years ago that for some reason was posted publicly, and it showed a more detailed look at more detention facilities in the United States. And it included several facilities that weren't on ICE's sort of like public map that you can see on their website. And that's the one where we saw the Reading facility. And we were like, oh, so like this is recognized by ICE, but you kind of have to do like really deep digging in order to find it.
And is that because its category as a holding room is different than a formal like detention center or something like that?
That's what we think. Detention centers, they hold a lot more people at a time. So ICE is supposed to post those online, but they have a lot of these holding facilities throughout the country. And since there isn't as much activity there, we think that that's why they're not posted publicly, is because they're only really meant to hold 1 to 3 people at a time, maybe not even that many. So we believe that that is why, but we were never really able to get direct confirmation from ICE about why they don't publicly list these sites.
And the request that kind of cracked it open for you, can you walk back to that exactly? What was that exact request to the city you said?
Yeah, there were a lot of separate requests that I made, and I'm like kind of blanking on the exact verbiage that I used for them. But I remember through looking at the internet, I saw that they had, like the city of Reading had lease agreements with ICE. So we specifically requested that, like any agreements that you have on file to lease property to ICE, DHS, HSI. And I think that's where we were able to find the majority of the information that we had. I remember we also did some different requests to request communication between City of Reading officials and ICE. And that's where we were able to get more confirmation about sort of like the construction of this facility, and just the confirmation that it even existed.
But when you had asked about it, it sounds like officials seemed to say that they didn't know it existed, or even I think Reading Police Department at first said they weren't very sure of it, or the language I'm not specifically remembering, but it seemed like they had to backpedal a little bit, and it also explained that it was their contract, right? Even though maybe they at first didn't seem to be so aware of it.
Yeah, and that was the weird part is when we approached city officials about this facility, we didn't convey that we knew about it. We just kind of said, hey, we've kind of heard rumors that there might be a facility in Reading. Do you know anything about this? And at first they would all say, we have no clue. Like, we've never heard of this facility. And then we would say, oh, well, we have like these city records on file that show that you actually signed off on a part of this facility. Can you tell us more about that? And then they would say, oh, like we knew that there was like this facility here. It's just we didn't know the exact details about it. So that was like almost a little bit of like a gotcha moment, but it was really interesting to get them on record at first saying that they didn't know anything about it. And then once we presented proof, their answers kind of changed with that.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I feel like that's really important, but also maybe kind of relates to what Danielle was saying about the like butter on toast part of this as well, is that like it's so a part of it that like not maybe everyone knows exactly how the relationship is working, even if they knew generally it was there, you know. If you're going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't really know all the details, but maybe they did know something was there, but it's just how long had that contract been going for by the time that you were requesting these documents?
I can't remember the specific length off the top of my head. I think it's in the story. But I think it had been around 10 to 15 years. I can't remember the exact contract length, but I do know that people have been held there for, I think, over 10 years because this is kind of leading into more investigating that we did. But when we first did this initial investigation into the facility itself, we couldn't confirm if people were actually being held there or not, or if it really was an active facility. It wasn't until the Deportation Data Project, which is like this research-based, big data set. I'm sure a lot of you know about it. That has all of these ICE records. I mean, it's an incredibly useful tool. When that came out, we looked through it to see if this like Reading holding facility was on it, and it was. And we were able to see that hundreds of people have been detained in this facility in recent years. And when Trump was inaugurated, the detainment spiked. I mean, it was crazy seeing the number of people who were detained there, especially because this area of Northern California has an extreme lack of diversity. So you really like most people have no clue that there's any sort of like ICE activity here because it's majority white populations. So they think like, oh, it's probably just all in like Southern California that this activity is happening. But through the deportation data project's data sets, we were able to find out that that's not the case, that there's people being held in this facility almost every single day.
Can you talk a little bit more about using the deportation data projects data? Because I feel like I saw Danielle and Kate both nod. I feel like they're really driving a lot of great reporting by being able to provide that data.
Yeah, it is a super helpful tool. They have a lot of different data sets within their whole project. The specific one that I used was on detention stints. That's what it's called. It's basically just this like massive Excel file that shows, every single detention facility that they have records for, every single person who is booked into these facilities. There's different demographic information about them, like what their country of citizenship is, prior criminal conviction levels, which was also really important to find out for our investigation because we have a major conservative population here, and a lot of them really believe that the people who are being detained and deported are these really violent criminals, kind of like the administration has made it seem. But through looking at the Deportation Data Project, we were able to find that the majority of the people who are detained have no prior criminal conviction. So that was another important point that we made in our story. But basically, I mean, it is kind of like a bigger learning curve when you're using this data set because it's massive. I mean, there's so many records in it. So it takes a lot of like filtering. So if you're looking for your specific facility, it's important to know the exact name of it and then to filter to just look at records for that facility. And once we were able to filter that, we used pivot tables in Excel to sort of do like a closer look at, how many people were being held there, what countries they were coming from. And we were also able to track how long people were held in these facilities because these data sets include the date and the time that these people were booked in, and then when they were booked out. So you're able to, kind of analyze that and see exactly how long people are being held there for.
And did that match up with what your previous reporting was leading to in terms of how long they should or would be held there?
So previously, when we had sort of like revealed this facility in the first place, we didn't even know that it was like a holding facility or this hold room. That's the technical term by ICE. We didn't really know much about it. And we just knew that it was an ICE facility, and that city officials at first said that they didn't know about it, but then they kind of did. So then when we were doing this second investigation about, actual ICE activity inside of it and actual people being held there, that's when we found out that it's called Reading Hold Room. And we were like, well, what is a hold room? So then we did more research online about hold rooms. I got in contact with multiple immigration law attorneys. And it was actually two different attorneys who were currently working on cases having to do with hold rooms in completely different parts of the country. Because since ICE has been ramping up deportation activity, people have been held in these hold rooms for much longer than they should be across the country, not just here in Reading. So there's lawsuits going on, as we speak, that are suing ICE for holding people inside of these facilities, violating their constitutional rights because it's really inhumane conditions to be held there for multiple days.
And we're getting close to maybe wrapping up and getting towards questions, but I wanted to kind of shift over to the sheriff side of things and talk a little bit about 287G. Can you tell us about some of your reporting on the Shasta sheriff?
Yeah, so it basically started with the Deportation Data Project. In one of their data sets, they have detainer requests, which Danielle and Kate were talking about this. On my side, it was a little bit different because we saw that ICE was making requests to have the jail notify if there was, like, basically, ICE has this whole data set of people of interest. And if they find out that that person is in the jail, they will send this request to the jail and basically just say, like, hey, can you let us know exactly when and where this person is going to be released? So we saw that this was happening through the Deportation Data Project, and we did a whole investigation into that, which that's the whole other story. But part of that investigation was requesting communication between the sheriff's office, the jail, and ICE. And for that specific request, we basically just said that we request all correspondence between any personnel from the Shasta Sheriff's Office and or the Shasta County Jail with anyone with an email address ending in, ice.dhs.gov or dhs.gov, et cetera. And we requested between like a specific time frame. I think it was the past 3 years or so. And then we included specific keywords in it, like immigration enforcement. We used the specific detainer request forms, which are called I-247 forms. And once we got that request back, it took like a month. It took kind of longer than we would have expected. Usually it takes about 2 weeks. We got all of these emails between the sheriff's office and ICE. And when I was looking through those emails, I saw that there was one point when the sheriff's office had tried to enter the 287G program with ICE, which, if anyone doesn't know, it's just a program that kind of deputizes local law enforcement officers as ICE agents. And basically, the Shasta Sheriff's Office sent an email to the 287G email, like they have their own email address for it, saying, hey, we want to join this program. And then I sent back an email saying, are you sure you can do that? Like California law says that you're not supposed to join these agreements, which is true. And then the sheriff's office was like, oh, shoot, yeah, you're right, we can't do that. But then the sheriff also sent this letter back saying, but we really want to try to find some sort of workaround because we really value immigration enforcement. And that was a really interesting piece that we found because it showed, not only did the sheriff try to enter something that would have been illegal to enter per California law, but he also made his stance on immigration enforcement very clear. And that was a really interesting story that we had no clue we'd even, report on because we didn't think that he was going to try to enter such an agreement since it would violate state law. But it just kind of came from this whole other set of requests that we had been making.
And what I felt was like really important about that as well, and again, to go back to Danielle's point about the bread and the butter, is like then ICE responded, right, and said basically something like, well, maybe there is a way we can work things out. Or they seem to kind of imply that despite there being a state law, they have at some points tried to find ways around it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what the sheriff's office had said as well. They said that we want to try to find a way to sort of like work around California law so that we're still able to enter some sort of like memorandum of agreement. We did end up requesting if the sheriff's office has any sort of like agreements on file, and we didn't get anything back. And when we had reached out to the sheriff's office to see if they had tried to, form some sort of workaround, we never got a response. So it's kind of unclear if anything actually moved forward in that case, but it's something that we're still looking into.
Hmm. And speaking of still looking into, I'm going to ask you to maybe talk a little bit about like what's coming up for you, what you want to look into, or what requests you want to keep filing as hopefully people send some questions in. So if you're listening now and you want to give us some questions, put them in the chat or in the Q&A. Either one works, honestly. And while you do that, maybe we'll talk about some future reporting angles.
Yeah. So, in this current moment, we're really busy with elections. Our primary is on June 2nd. So, immigration reporting has been kind of taking a side note. But because of all this reporting that we've done in the past few months, it's really opened our eyes into the fact that, this is just going to be something that keeps happening. Like, it's not like we just checked it and now, like, immigration activity and enforcement is completely done. So, we're planning on doing different check-ins like once every 3 to 6 months, sending these same exact requests that I made months ago, and just seeing what sort of updates have been made. Still requesting all communication between ICE, the sheriff's office, the local police departments. So that's a plan that we have in place. We're also interested in doing reporting, sort of like Danielle and Kate have been doing, where there is also a program here that pays jails if they house undocumented people. So we want to do more digging into that, see exactly how much our jail has received from that. But that's kind of on our radar right now.
And let's see, we just got a question in from Eric. Eric says, hey, I'm here in Orlando, Florida. I've noticed that our local jail is holding people for ICE for longer than 48 or 72 hours. In many cases, it's detaining people with only one hold for an immigration violation and no local or state charges. I'm curious if you've discovered any reasoning from counties or jails for holding someone longer than the period typically outlined in immigration detainers. Do internal policies guide how long a jail will keep someone for ICE? That's a very good question.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
oh yeah, go ahead,
I was
Madison.
kidding. Oh, okay. Thanks. I think sometimes it also depends on state law. So per California law, they're usually not supposed to honor detainer requests. And I know that other states have, sort of similar guidelines, but they also state that if a request is honored, there is a maximum length that someone is supposed to be held there for. And if they're held past that point, it infringes on their constitutional rights. So I think that is a matter of both looking at jail policy and state law around that, because you do have a lot of different attorneys who are also arguing that you cannot be holding someone past the release date for this long because it is infringing on their rights.
Yeah, I know one of our colleagues who works out of our Berks County Bureau at Spotlight has been kind of trying to like pin some of this down and figure out when people who are being held pending, to honor an ICE detainer for longer, like what the county is doing, are they letting the person go, whatever. But what I was just gonna say is you might want to check and just make sure that those folks aren't being held as a part of more long-term agreement. Because like what Kate and I, oh, did I glitch out there? Um, what Kate and I reported on, okay, was that the jails, they're basically holding a section of their beds to detain people the same way that ICE does in their facilities. So you just want to maybe make sure that it's not you might want to make sure that these people are on detainers or if they're being held in detention. I know it sounds like the same thing, but it's not.
Hmm. Kate, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's basically what Danielle said. Like, if it's a detainer agreement versus like the jail is acting as a detention center, because if it's a detention center, then you don't have to have any criminal violations. Like, it could just
Right.
be that some sort of immigration, like civil proceeding, and you can be held until the situation, like your immigration situation is resolved, or you could. I think that like you could self-deport and then you can leave, but you can't, stay in the US. So it just depends on the kind of hold it is.
Hmm. And actually, while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, this brings me to a question I have for you all is like, speaking of like the detention versus detainer question or point, like, are there any other sort of kind of like tips or cautionary advice that you would give to someone who's listening to this and like, okay, I'm just going to start filing requests, that are along those lines of like, okay, we learned this along the way, and it would be good for someone to start knowing that.
For me, it was knowing really specifically what to request because we initially made a request when we found out about these detainer agreements. And we used that term. We were like, we request all detainer agreements between ICE and the sheriff's office. But the public information officer was like, I don't really know what you're talking about. So then we had to do more research into what specifically these forms were called, and then we were able to request those forms and get the actual contracts that ICE was sending over to the jail. So as I mentioned earlier, those forms are called I-247 forms. So, if you believe that your jail is getting detainer requests from ICE, you can just request those specific forms. But they also have these like even more specific forms based on what ICE is asking the jail to do. So if the jail is asking to hold someone to notify ICE of that person's release, it'll have a different letter after the 247. And the different letters are G, A, D, N, and X. So I feel like that was just a really important thing for me to learn myself was requesting every single type of those so that the PIO could just, keyword search and then send me those directly.
And are these are like the like a data dictionary for something like this? Is this something that you found online? Is this something that varies state to state, or is generally used like across the country?
I believe it's something that's generally used. I actually, ChatGPT was the one who even like told me about this because it was really hard to find like exact information on like ICE websites. And I remember I was working through the wording because sometimes I use ChatGPT to work through the wording and the verbiage that I use for my requests. And when I did that, it recommended that I request these specific forms because it was like, hey, you might not know, but they're actually called this. And I was like, wow, that's like crazy. So no one told me except for AI, which was
Yeah.
weird.
I mean, that's helpful. Sometimes, like something scraping all these web pages that are hard to find finds the names of things that you would have to like click link into link and link, Or I think you had mentioned like finding a presentation that the city had done or finding a PDF where they talked about something, and then you get the actual language you're looking for. I feel like maybe not for this specifically, but that often happens to me with public records requests. It's like I finally find the like I don't know, like PowerPoint slides on how the agency itself talks about the thing. And I'm like, aha, that's what they call it. Like that's what I'll request.
Yeah, and I
Um,
just again kind of an answer to what Eric is asking in the chat. I don't know so much about internal policies. I think it's it's jail to jail. Like it's like jail to jail, facility to facility. Um, depending on whether they have a formal agreement or they're just like happy to hold somebody. But what I will do is also like underline what Kate is saying. Just because somebody is moved from one place to another doesn't mean that that first place doesn't have a long-term agreement. I mean, they are moving these people around all the time. Like, so what I would recommend that you do for Eric and just for everybody is like if you want to try to get a sense of how often um, a facility or a jail is holding somebody and help that tailor the request that you're making, go to deportationdata.org. Go to in the middle, there's a column that says data, and then there's different data sets. Go to the ICE detention facilities tab and then filter for your state. Find the codes there's codes that are just like capital letters. Yeah, okay. Dylan, yeah, go do
let's do
this.
it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's do it for the Orlando County Jail because Eric is asking. So go to deportationdata.org.
Oh, wait, am I showing the right screen? No.
I'm seeing a beautiful blue background.
Got it. There we go.
There we go. Okay, so go down to
On it.
ICE detention facilities.
All right. Second. Let me move a bunch of things over. Okay. Here we go. Okay. I'll go to ICE detention
Facilities.
facilities.
Yep. So then over in the filter, you're going to select column state. Go down to state. You're gonna choose value, Florida, so FL. Okay, so then this is listing every single place a person has been held. So scroll down, down, down to Orange County Jail. Up a little. We missed it. Okay, so it's ORANGFL. So copy that if you could, Dylan.
Yep.
Okay, so then go back to the homepage. Sorry.
No, this is great. This is good. We're getting
Then
down
go
to
to ICE detention stays and then
filter again.
filter by detention facility codes all and then put that code in there. Okay, there you go. So here is, I mean, so the stay ID is like a hashed value. So it's and like don't hold me to this because I haven't worked in this as much as I think maybe Madison has. So I don't know if each row here represents one person or something else. But you can obviously see that like a lot of people are going through the Orange County Jail to the extent that it might be worth. So if you go like all the way over, you can see kind of the length of time because there's like a check-in, check-out. Yeah, stay, book in date time, stay, book out time. And again, this is a little tough because you don't know necessarily what facility that's for, or if that's like just on the whole. Like I said, I haven't done as much work with this data set as the arrest data set. But like, yeah, you can see this person went through all these different places. Um, so I would put some records requests into the Orange County Jail, I guess is the moral of the story here. Asking for detainers in the way that Madison did, but also maybe long-term agreements in the way we did.
And as we wrap up, is there any other kind of like starter kit requests or to-dos? I like that we walk through that very hands-on. Like, what are the next steps? So you file those detainers or long-term agreements requests. Is there anything else on that list? Um, Whether it's jails or if you're interested in a sheriff's office or a local police department.
I think requesting communication is a really interesting part. Communication between the sheriff's office, the jail, local police departments, even like your, city municipalities, maybe like the city council, just requesting, any sort of correspondence, whether that's email, call, text messages between ICE, and you can say the exact email address, or if you find specific ICE officials that they might be talking to. I think that that's also a really good place to start because that's going to reveal a lot of what's going on in your area.
And then actually, before we close out, one question did come in for you, Madison, in the Q&A. Um, Someone asked, how long did it take for Shasta to respond to your ICE communication PRA? How did you limit it to speed up a response? I have similar open requests for a few agencies that are approaching 1 year processing despite only asking for 1 month's worth of communications.
1 year would be insane. I mean, I feel like it depends on who you're requesting to. Like I was requesting to, my local county government, and I mean, per law, like they're supposed to respond to that within 2 weeks, and then, they're supposed to, if they request an extension, that's only supposed to be for 2 more weeks, unless they've communicated with that, like with me. So if you requested it to an agency that's within like the county or the state, and they still haven't given it to you after a year, like I feel like that gives grounds to pursue like legal action. And that's something that I've actually done in the past for completely different reporting, but they were taking a really, really long time to send something back. So we started getting involved with the legal process, and then they were like, okay, fine, like we don't want to go through this whole process of like potentially getting sued, so we'll just give you the records. If it's a federal request that you're making, that's a different story because they can take forever to get it to you, and it's technically legal when they do that. So it just depends. I would say if it's something that's like a local, regional, or state office that you're sending this request to, I would say really start pushing on the legal side for that. Okay, so it's the California County Sheriff's. Yeah, I would definitely pursue some sort of like legal action. Maybe I know we've worked with the First Amendment Coalition. That might be really helpful to just reach out to them and say, like, hey, it's been over a year since we requested this. It's not a burdensome request because if it's only 1 month, like that should be something that's relatively very easy for them to give you. So I think starting with contacting an agency like that to see what sort of next steps and rights that you have would be a good first step.
Yeah, I've also worked with FAC and they're really great. So yeah, definitely First Amendment Coalition, especially or only if you're in California. But I'd add to that kind of my 2 cents of communications request. I think Madison was describing her request and like it had all the makings of a very good request, which is like a actually a year is a pretty long time frame. I'm glad that you got that quickly, but usually like a really tight time frame or as tight a time frame as you can get. Your keyword or term search that's like super specific. So you're not just pulling up tons and tons of emails for their attorneys to review. And those specific domain names for the emails that you're interested in or the addresses that you're interested in. Like those three things together can narrow it down such that it can take them a lot less time to go through it. But yeah, a year is a long time. And one thing I always do with communications requests is try to get them to describe to me exactly how many hits they get for those emails sooner rather than later. And I always say, I'm amenable to restricting this request in different ways, depending on what your timelines are, so that they can see that I'm on it and I want to know how long it's going to take them. And if my dates are too long or my keywords are too broad, then we can work to get it trimmed down as soon as possible. Um, Anything else to round us out? Any other questions? I will just share the giant fences that I was trying to share my screen earlier to show, and I realized I was showing the wrong monitor. Um, these are the fences that Madison was talking about. Um,
They
and
look a lot smaller in this picture, but I swear they're pretty daunting when you're standing right next to them.
there's a little bit of perspective happening there. Anything else? Oh, maybe another question came in. Oh no, we answered that one. Great. Well, Madison, Danielle, Kate, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being on the call and asking such great questions. Um, I think I'm going to be working on a couple other guides to ICE public records and data in the next couple months, and hopefully maybe featuring more of Danielle and Kate's work or Madison's work, and highlighting some of the language in their requests. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, and thanks so much, y'all.
Thank you so much, Dylan.